too late at any age.
Oh, that was a great way to start the show. Good afternoon, morning, I'm not sure, happy day. Mary Pat McKee here with Indy Boomer Magazine. I publish a magazine called Indy Boomer, as you can see there on the screen. I am sitting here this morning with Jane Malkoff from Clarity Care Advisors. Did I say advisors? Advocates. Advocates is
so we
proper.
We advise.
Yes, that's true. She's advised us, my family, many, many times, but we'll get into that. Go to Kroger or Marsh, pick up a copy of Indy Boomer Magazine. On Friday, we will have the new issue, the March issue out, which we're very excited about. It'll have Two Chicks and a Hammer, the HGTV, I can't even say that, Good Bones show that they do.
Oh, nice.
Also, we want to thank Jim Wofford with Logan Street Signs and Banners and Noblesville Trophy, and I think I did that a lot better than I usually do in thanking him from allowing us to have this show. So, Jane, let's jump in. Time flies.
Wonderful. Yes,
it always
does.
flies when we chat. But first, before we start, I want people to know what it is you do. It's very important. You are a geriatric nurse practitioner.
Yes.
And she has helped my family on numerous occasions in the last 5 years. It started 5 years ago, and then just recently we had another episode of trying to figure out, navigate's a good word, the whole retirement community system. And that's a big system. I mean, and as we know, it runs all over. What Jane's going to talk about is Nursing 101, Nursing Care Facilities 101. What you need to know, what you should be looking for, right?
Yes, and how to really get the most out of what you're looking for.
Right. So lead us down that
great.
path.
Well, like you said, I am a nurse practitioner, but my business is Clarity Care Advocates. So we do a lot of navigation of all people in the healthcare system. So it could be anything from as simple as how do I get my mom and dad out to a doctor's appointment and have a competent person there with them to help them through that, to going to a hospital in an emergency situation on the weekend because the family's having trouble understanding what's happening and what they should do next.
Right.
And through this process, we end up navigating a lot of people on a weekly basis through nursing facilities.
Right.
Skilled nursing facilities and assisted living primarily.
Okay.
And so when we look at just those two entities in the United States, we have over 2 million people that are living in those types of settings. It's one of the largest components of the healthcare system.
So assisted living and skilled
nursing.
Skilled nursing.
So not necessarily a retirement center where you're living independently, and
Right.
I'm not talking about the social model of assisted living, but the licensed skilled nursing sections of a nursing facility where you might be receiving rehab or memory care.
Right.
And assisted living, licensed assisted living.
Okay.
And so what we find is it's very concerning for people when they're making that decision for a loved one. They don't know what they're looking at sometimes, and they rely on the marketing
They have no experience. You
and
don't
they have
any.
no experience.
Yeah.
And the building could be very pretty, and the marketing person is usually amazing, wonderful, passionate, compassionate people. But then you don't always know what to expect. What's the care really going to be like? And so through the course of 20 years of doing this, we came up with some tips of the top. We have about 10 items that we tell people that they really need to focus on. So I thought today maybe we could talk about some of the top 3 or 4, how many we can get through while we're chatting about what are some of the first things that you need to think about when you're looking for a skilled nursing facility or an assisted living facility.
Well, one thing I always tell people, right or wrong, the facility is as good as the nurses that are in it. It really doesn't have anything to do with how pretty the building is. I learned this from Jane. But how pretty the building is or the marketing people, it has to do with the nurses and how attentive they are. But tell us
and that can fluctuate month to month, year to year.
Yeah.
It fluctuates. And so a building that may have had a reputation of 20 years in the community of being very good could suddenly find themselves under management that's not really clinically sound or adhering to the same standard. And if you think about it, in the state of Indiana, you're rewarded for meeting a minimum standard.
Right.
You're not rewarded when you go above and beyond. If you meet the minimum standard, you're doing good. Right. And then we don't have laws in our state for minimal staffing.
Right.
So we have sort of
So there is no ratio, is there?
There's no required ratio.
Okay.
We have it in daycare centers, but we don't have it in care for older adults.
Right.
So families making these decisions often go into it thinking that this is somehow going to be set up with some logical safety procedures, when really it is truly minimum standards and no minimum staffing requirement. But that doesn't mean you don't have awesome people in the buildings or awesome managers. So one of the first things that we advise people is when you're making a decision, don't rely on the marketing person, don't rely on a hospital discharge planner, and don't rely on your medical doctor to tell you which building is best.
Okay.
This is a word of mouth, community scuttle sort of business.
Meaning you do better to hear what other people have been saying about it.
That's right.
Okay.
And you can contact folks like us who make that our business to know that information. But ask around and talk around and ask people what they think of it. Because the discharge planner has the goal of helping you, but they need to get you discharged to an empty bed in the community.
Right.
Doctors have so much to do that for them to really be in and out of all of these buildings and understand on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis who's doing best with fractured hips, who's doing best with dementia, they don't have that type of information. But they might have a relationship with somebody who pops in their office and brings them
they hear about it.
They hear about it, but they don't really know the scuttle on the street. So you don't want the advice in any other way than real life experience of real people who have been in the building.
Right. Let me ask you this. Do the doctors, say you broke a hip, the doctor doesn't then go follow you to the rehab? No. So those doctors don't go in.
That's right.
Okay.
So they really are, it's really a specialty to be a physician nowadays, your specialty and what you're in.
There's
so
too
they
much
don't have
information.
your continuum of information.
Right.
And there's, even if they studied 24 hours a day, they would never know everything there is to know in the current environment, let alone know what went on at facility on North Indy over the last 2 months.
Right.
There's no way they're going to know all of that type of scuttle. So that's the first thing we tell folks. And then we tell folks that your participation, family participation in that loved one's life and facility is the second most important thing. You have to figure out what level of involvement the family can have.
Right.
So proximity is something to consider.
And a lot of people do
and
that.
Quality of the history of the quality of the relationship between that family member and the person in the facility, and a family member who has the strength to speak up when they find a problem. You may not want to move mom into a facility by somebody in the family who wouldn't say to the staff, that's not proper care of my mother. We need to have a meeting about that. It needs to be that the family involved can have some say-so. So it's important to move in and out of the building at different times of the day, not always on an expected pattern, and get to know the different people on the different shifts. So that family involvement is very important. And I would say, for me, I tell people, right in line with those first two things to be prepared for is to identify inside the building within the first week you're there who your go-to person is.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
You might go in and say, I found my mother wet from incontinence and it looks like she's been wet for a while. And you go to the nurse on duty and you go to the aide and they take care of it for you. If it's a good facility, they'll get to it quickly and politely and they'll do it with a great deal of care. But then you go back the next time and the same problem has occurred.
Right.
And you go back the third time and it's happened again. And maybe in between it was a little bit better. But you never took that information to somebody who has a little bit of authority in the building.
Right.
So you have to identify a go-to person in addition to the basic staff at hand that's going to deal with the problem right then in real time. It's often the social worker.
I was going to ask you, who is it usually?
It's often the social worker or it's the assistant director of nursing.
Okay.
And so that means you can't worry that you're bothering them. So if you go in 5 times a week and 5 times a week you see a problem, don't worry like, oh, I don't want to tell her again. I'm just going to let the nurse know and then I'll wait and see if it's better next week. Right from the outset, you want to identify your go-to person and develop a professional, kind relationship with them where it's very much matter of fact, I'm looking for your help. When I've come in twice this week, I found my mother wet. It appeared to me it looked like it wasn't fresh, and I need your help to help me make sure this doesn't happen. If it happens again the next day, you tell her again. Well, you see, well, she's not always available. That's okay. Call the next morning, leave a voice message.
Persistence.
But you just keep going back to that person because if you find find that go-to person that's in that position of social worker, assistant DON,
Right.
and you've gone to them consistently, diligently, time after time, and nothing changes,
Right.
that's when you have to start thinking about, am I really in the right place?
Right. I agree. Yeah.
Because somebody in that position should be able to impact change for you,
Right.
and be open to the fact that, oh my goodness, I'm sorry that you're continuing to have this problem. And I think what ties in with that nicely is also the fourth thing we recommend is participate in the care plan meetings. You should be having
And
a quarterly care
ask
plan
for them.
meeting. Yes, if they are not inviting you to a care plan meeting
Yeah.
on a quarterly basis,
On a quarterly, that's your expectation
inside
level?
a skilled facility,
Excuse me.
then call them and say, I don't know if you're having them and I'm not being invited, or if you're not doing them any longer, but you would like to have quarterly. And then you can call care plan meeting anytime you have a problem.
Right.
You don't have to wait for the quarterly meeting. And I have some families who've had significant enough problems where we implement a weekly connection with somebody in charge and maybe the unit director to work on a specific problem and get updates on it until we know there's been improvement.
Right.
So it's that consistency
And that accountability.
in a way that's not, we often have a lot of guilt, and we often want to find a place to place that or to place blame. And while you need to find the source of the problem to be able to work through the problem to create a team, you have to be able to have that communication with somebody of authority that is a professional connection and relationship. So you want to go and say things not like, every time I come in, my mother's wet and I won't have this. You want to say, we have a problem we need to work on here, and I'm serious about this.
Yeah.
I can't come in here and continue to find my mother in this condition. What are we going to do? I need your help.
Right.
You see, there's a little...
Oh, yeah.
you wanna
Presentation is
yes.
everything. Yeah, exactly.
But you'll know quickly whether you can get that sort of help, and then you can decide whether you're in the right place.
Is there any place for people to go, brand new people who never navigated through this system, to, I mean, does the state board have something? I mean, is there, you
Yes,
know,
I'm
like
glad yes.
you know what I mean, like a 5-star system, or how do you know?
I really like the Medicare, the federal system, where you can go out and very quickly get a look at, is this rated 5-star? So 5-star is the best you can be.
Right.
However, you don't get all the detail you need. I prefer clients be familiar with the Indiana State Department of Health consumer reports for nursing facilities.
Okay.
So if
And
they
there is
go
such a
to the
beast.
www.in.gov
Right.
/ISDH,
ISDH.
Indiana State Department of Health.
Okay.
You
Makes
can
sense.
click on the long-term care link, and it's complicated for people who've never used it. So I always tell folks, feel free to call me, because at no charge I will guide you to where you need to be on there, because it's hard to connect if you've never used that site before.
Yeah.
But you can pull up every licensed skilled facility in the state of Indiana and look at their last 3 years of surveys.
Okay.
You can look at all the complaints that were filed, the reason for the complaints, and you can compare their score to the scores of other buildings.
Okay.
And I have found a lot of truth in those scores over the past 15 years.
Really?
How
Okay.
they look and how they
'Cause you never
represent
know,
in
yeah.
comparison. And you have to learn how to compare apples to apples. Not all buildings can be compared to other buildings. Some buildings don't take complicated patients who already have lots going on. And so buildings that will take those complicated patients, it's harder to have that better
How would
score.
you know?
You have to, again, be careful that when you are taking the advice about where to place a loved one, that you're not basing it on anything other than people who had a similar situation
Right.
and feedback on how it's gone for them recently.
Which is hard to do.
It's hard to do. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's why we've been a valuable resource.
Oh, yeah.
But another way that you can do that is you can reach out to the Indiana Ombudsman through the FSSA, Family and Social Service
Okay.
Administration.
Yeah.
There are long-term care ombudsmen that you can reach out to. I have that phone number too, if you'd like me to give it. Locally, you can dial 317-232-7134, and you can ask to discuss your loved one's care with an ombudsman.
Okay,
That's not filing a formal complaint.
I'm gonna play really stupid because I am. What is ombudsman?
An ombudsman,
That's hard to say.
an ombudsman,
I could probably never spell it either.
is somebody who's assigned
Uh huh.
to help you work out a solution to a situation and to inform you. So in this case,
So that we
this
have
is
those?
a long-term care ombudsman.
Wow.
So it's not filing a complaint with the state. A lot of people worry if they file a complaint or they don't know if it's serious enough to file a complaint. They're worried about reaching out. A lot of people think if I say something, will it make my parents or my loved ones' care worse?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
a myth. It is really quite the opposite. But an ombudsman is also a team builder, and it's
That is
and it's
pretty
a
cool.
free service.
Yeah.
They're very busy.
Yeah, I
But
bet.
one great thing they can do is say, you know what? They can't tell detail, but they can say, let's say you have a loved one who's gotten pressure sores in a facility, which I mentioned earlier is one
Yeah.
of the number one signs of neglect. In 99% of cases, it's neglect. So you could say...
Is that because they laid too long?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
But often what you hear from a nursing facility is, well, they refused. They
I know that story.
refused to be repositioned, and we can't force anybody to do things. But that's a whole other show. We could talk about that. And how
We
to,
always have another show.
And how to overcome when that's the message you're receiving, and how to
Right.
get people to work together to take care of things in a way that doesn't force somebody into something they don't want. But the ombudsman could say, you know what, I am dealing, or I have dealt with 2 other family members with similar concerns in the last couple of months, so there does appear to be a trend.
Okay.
So they can give you that sort of information. They can come in and sit with you if you don't have the resources or the desire to have someone like me or nurses from my company come and do that.
Right.
The ombudsman can attend care plan meetings with you.
Oh, really?
And-
That is so cool. I've never heard this information before.
And
That's great.
Their time has to be used in situations where there's a need. They probably won't get involved if you say nobody's helping mom with the menu every week. Because that is a big concern.
Well, food's
But
a big
when
one
they're
to 'em,
choosing
yeah.
how to spend their energy helping people, they're going to choose things where you're really concerned, like, I don't know if this is what I should be seeing. Do I need to think about moving mom? And then they will have information. They can
Yeah.
even help you go through the ISDH website and look at
Okay.
those reports.
That is great information, Jane. That really is great. Hey, if you are needing to move your folks, if you're behind that 8 ball, which I know a lot of us are, that's how we kind of get thrown into this situation because something's happened to our parents, they're not safe or something like that. You need to give Jane a call. The number's there on the screen. I am a huge advocate for Jane and her services only because my family has used them on numerous occasions, and it's just been great. I mean, it's really helped us because a lot of times people don't know what to ask. They don't even know what they don't know. So anyway, so very good. Jane, thank you for coming.
Thank you,
It's
Mary
always a
Pat.
pleasure, my dear. There's Jim Davis on the January issue of Indy Boomer Magazine. You can pick it up at any Kroger or Marsh store in the Indianapolis and surrounding areas. And we appreciate you watching the show. And he's going to make... Don't forget, Sunday mornings at 10:30 on Channel 8 is Boomer TV with Patty Spitler. Be sure and check that out as well. Thank you, Jim, for your signal.